Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a total juggernaut in the personal finance world, Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover. We're going to look at the exact framework that has helped over 10 million people pay off an absolutely staggering $100 billion in debt. I mean, that's wild, right? But here's the truly fascinating part. This book doesn't solve the crushing problem of debt and financial stress with complicated math or, sophisticated spreadsheets. No. It solves it with psychology.
And that brings us right to the absolute core thesis of our explainer today. Personal finance is 80% behavior, 20% math. This one quote really explains why so many smart, capable people make terrible money decisions. Ramsey's whole prescription assumes you might have already tried and, frankly, failed with those math-optimal approaches. We all know the math, right? Spend less than you earn. Simple. But it's our habits that trip us up. The core premise here is that changing your behavior matters way more than finding the perfect financial strategy.
So part 1, the 7 baby steps. This is where we get into a real behavioral plan.
Okay, let's dive into this framework. Think of it as a rigid behavioral architecture designed to take you all the way from overwhelming debt to genuine financial peace. Now, what is absolutely crucial here is the strict sequence. First, you start with a $1,000 beginner emergency fund. Second, you attack your debt. Third, you build a much larger 3 to 6 month, fully funded emergency fund. Fourth, you invest 15% for retirement. Fifth, the kids' college fund. Sixth, pay off the house early. And finally, step 7, you build lasting wealth and you give generously. Listen, you absolutely cannot skip ahead. Ramsey hammers this point home repeatedly. There is no retirement investing while you're still fighting off your credit cards. You have to focus entirely on one target at a time.
Let's zoom in a bit closer on that fully funded emergency fund. Step 3. Is 3 to 6 months really necessary? Well, according to a recent Bankrate annual emergency savings report, 1 out of 3 U.S. adults had a dip into their emergency savings in just the past year alone. But more importantly, 63% of people surveyed believe they needed to save up to 6 months of living expenses just to feel comfortable. 63%. That number really highlights the very real financial anxiety folks are facing today and exactly why having that solid cash buffer is so critical before you even think about investing.
Moving on to part 2, budgeting every single dollar.
So how do you actually execute this in your everyday life? It starts with giving every single dollar a specific name and purpose before the month even begins. It's a concept known as zero-based budgeting. A really brilliant practical application of this is the physical envelope system. By actually taking money out of your bank account and putting cold, hard cash into physical envelopes for categories like gas and power, the totally abstract concept of budgeting becomes wonderfully tangible. Seriously, when the gas envelope is empty, you stop buying gas or you have to physically take cash from another envelope. It makes cheating on your budget incredibly difficult and forces you to confront your spending habits head-on.
All right, part 3, the Debt Snowball method.
Once your budget is totally locked in, it's time for the psychological secret sauce of the whole book, actually attacking the debt. Here, you list your debts not by interest rate, but by the total payoff balance, from smallest to largest. Let's look at a real-world example. Say you've got a $50 diagnostic bill, a $460 hospital bill, and a $770 Home Depot bill. You make minimum payments on everything else, and you throw every spare dollar you have at that tiny $50 bill. Why? Because paying off that small debt gives you a massive psychological dopamine hit. You get to cross it off your list, take the money you were paying on it, and roll it right into the next bill. As the snowball rolls over, it picks up more cash and sustains your motivation to just keep going. It's like magic for your brain.
Up next, part 4, where the experts disagree.
Now, any explainer worth its salt has to look at the whole picture. And this is exactly where economists and financial advisors tend to, pull their hair out. The Total Money Makeover has definitely polarized smart readers, and there's sustained criticism of Ramsey's methods from the traditional financial establishment. The biggest point of contention? The Debt Snowball method itself. Because it prioritizes behavior and motivation, it is mathematically inferior to the debt avalanche method, which tells you to target your highest interested debt first. Mathematically, for sure, the avalanche saves you more money on interest. But remember that 80-20 rule we talked about? Finance is 80% behavior. The snowball wins psychologically for people who desperately need quick wins to stay on track, while the avalanche is optimal for people who already have strict discipline and don't need that motivational dopamine hit.
Another major point of friction with the experts is the book's highly controversial stance on credit cards. This approach doesn't just ask you to use them responsibly. No, it asks you to avoid them entirely. Literally, cut them up. The thing is, having no active credit accounts for 6 months leaves you with a 0 FICO credit score, which stands in sharp contrast to almost universal financial advice. For highly disciplined users, completely avoiding credit cards means leaving thousands of dollars in travel rewards and cashback on the table. But this framework considers the sheer peace of mind of being completely debt-free to be a sufficient offsetting reward. So, you have to ask yourself, what matters more to you? Maximizing reward points or the absolute peace of mind of zero debt?
Which brings us to part 5. Is this book for you? Let's figure out if it's the right fit.
So, with this incredible tension between behavioral psychology and pure financial math, how do you know which approach is actually right for your specific financial life? Well, if you're someone who needs rigid discipline, who has maybe failed with budgeting in the past, or who is sitting in an active consumer debt crisis, say $50,000 in credit card debt, this behavioral approach can be genuinely life-saving. On the other hand, if you're a highly disciplined credit card user, a math optimizer, or a maximizer of arbitrage and rewards, this rigid system will actually cost you money. The prescription here is specifically meant for those who need behavioral architecture way more than they need mathematical efficiency.
And that brings us to our final takeaway. This entire plan isn't about outsmarting the banking system with a calculator, it's about outsmarting your own habits. If the math-optimal approaches just haven't worked for you yet, maybe the missing ingredient isn't a better interest rate, but better behavior. So my question to you is this. Are you finally ready to stop relying on complex financial math and start changing your behavior to actually change your finances?